Good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started with this AZTEC 4709 airbrush. This color cap here, if I want to spray fingernails, I can aim this airbrush down. We all know in class we need to keep the airbrush held level and vertically so that we spray air and water and displace that air and water evenly up and over. So it's a really bad idea to tilt this airbrush like this because moisture and friction and everything will get trapped in the hose up here. So these tips, when you look at them, the blue, black, white, cream, or gray tips, for the most part do the same thing until you open this roller to the right. When I open the roller to the right, it increases the cone. Airbrush paint comes out in a cone type shape, so when I open the roller to the right, it increases the airflow and the cone or the pattern of the paint. If I roll this roller to the left, it closes the cone pattern like so. It closes it and you get detail as you roll it to the left. So fundamentally, the rule has always been that rolling the roller to the left is least. If you want to blast paint out, say if you want to base coat a helmet or something like that, you want to roll the roller to the right. Roll it to the right, opens up the cone, and you can blast. Now, what I've always had a hard time explaining, because there is no one predominant setting on this airbrush, is that if you roll it, I normally keep this thing to about medium range. I roll it to a medium setting. But again, an airbrush starts to clog about every 3 minutes or so. This presupposes using acrylic paints. So every time this thing clogs, which it will, hopefully you guys understand now that it only takes a speckle of paint to cause a nightmare. Once it clogs, when you're goofing around and spraying, you want to take this roller and open it up to the right. When you open it up to the right, it opens the chamber, the air pattern, and it actually will allow your paint to blast out. So one of the habits you want to get into is, number one, keep your paint mixed to a skim milk consistency. Keep your pressure at about 50 to 53 or 54. With these AZTECs, a lot of times you will pop these things if you go beyond 60. So I have reverted to spraying around 53, 55 psi, but 50 might be good depending on the scale that you're working at. Now, one thing to explain here is that these tips all pretty much do the same thing. Now, I know that in the past I've said that they do different things. Black, blue, and white are all considered high flow tips. But you can, if you have a black tip, you put a black tip on here, you can get a pretty tight line with it. You'd be quite amazed. But when I say that they all do the same things, they pretty much do until you open your roller to the right. All right, for the most part they do. When you open your roller to the right, these tips all have different capacities. So what we're going to do, try to keep that nailed down. I think black and white are your highest flowing tips. Blue is a relatively high flow tip, and then you have again, gray is all purpose, and cream colored is detail nozzle, and depending on if it's a red or orange nozzle, it may be a stippling nozzle. I've never even used those, so this is just for your guys' reference and recourse here. I'm going to start with the roller too. You need to put some WD-40 on this thing every couple weeks to keep this roller loose. Now, WD-40 is compatible with acrylic paints, but if you're spraying enamel paints, you want to use graphite powder or graphite spray. Normally what I do is I will use an Iwata or a Pache or a metal airbrush for harder paints like enamels and wood stain and stuff like that, any type of a solvent-based material. I will not put it through this AZTEC, but Testors definitely says that you can. But again, I would stay with acrylics for this, and then maybe use another airbrush for enamels. What I have here, I want to talk about the roller. WD-40 that every couple weeks. And again, if you're using enamel paints, you want to take graphite spray or graphite powder, spray in there, and just turn on the news and roll that thing back and forth to keep it loose, okay? The guts here, in the middle part of the airbrush, Testors makes it very clear that you never want to take those apart and try to operate on this airbrush. Last time I checked, it had a lifetime guarantee. If you get stranded or you pop it or you damage it, you step on it, They usually send you an airbrush as long as you send a confirmation number that it's on its way. They will send you another one back. Okay, so WD-40 the roller here. Do not rip apart the guts. That's going to be a nightmare waiting to happen. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take off this blue tip, and I'm going to show you guys how to clean this thing. Okay, moving on here. What I have in this little petri dish is water, and what I'm going to do in this other one is I'm going to pour some acetone. And now acetone is probably almost $6 for whatever reason. I know that you definitely cannot buy more than one can of acetone at Walmart or wherever you get it, and they normally will ask you for ID because people make drugs and crack and everything else with it. So what I have here is water in this petri dish, and then I have some straight acetone. My 3-step little cleaning system here is basically, if you're airbrushing and goofing around and doing whatever, if the phone rings, you want to take your airbrush and submerge it in water about yay high. Okay. Now the cord, in which right now I don't have a cord on this one, or an air hose I mean, will normally keep it suspended to where it's submerged about that high. Try to zoom in on the camera here. About that high. You don't want to soak this thing up past this peg here, because any type of maybe dry paint particles or some type of cleaner, if it starts resonating around the trigger, it could leave a film and basically start contaminating and locking up the internal workings of this airbrush. So soak it in water. Let's say if you're airbrushing and the phone rings, your airbrush needs to be soaked in water about that high. Okay. A nightmare waiting to happen is just to set an airbrush down on the table with paint in it. You're going to come back and it's going to be a mess, especially if you have a pearl or any type of iridescent or opaque paint. Okay. So that's step one. Set your airbrush in water when you're not using it, and it keeps everything loose in there. Okay. Step two is you're going to come in with some glass cleaner here. Now you can use generic glass cleaner if you want to. We have to go over a couple things with glass cleaner. Number one, glass cleaner has ammonia and acetone in it. So it's not enough acetone to totally overhaul the airbrush, but in between colors, we'll spray this in our color cap, like so. We will open up the roller to the right, okay, and we will just blast the glass cleaner into our little towel that hopefully we've made a little cave out of, okay? Or you can just hold it in your hand and blast all the glass cleaner into the towel. And normally I have my students bring a big towel to class so they're not vaporizing or atomizing any ammonia or acetone that's inside this glass cleaner. So I think it's probably more damaging to what people get in transition of spraying colors in their lungs from the cleaners more than it actually is the toxicity of the paint. So in a nutshell, in between colors glass cleaner is step two. Okay. Moving on to step three, let's get the water out of the way here. I'm going to use straight acetone in a petri dish. And another thing here is I'm using these petri dishes because you do not want to dunk your fingers in a big Cool Whip bowl or something like that. A lot of people, if they have cuts or lesions in their hands, that acetone will get directly into your bloodstream, and that is definitely not a good thing. So get a little petri dish to where if you're, and this is straight acetone here, to where if you're dunking your fingers in these glass dishes, that you're kind of, number one, you're able to find the little parts to get in and grab needles, bearings, chucks. You're able to get in and out. Okay, so that's why I'm using this. You can also use a Peter Pan lid or anything that's really shallow. Okay, so we've already talked about step one is pulling in the water here. Okay, the phone rings. You set your airbrush in the water, yay high. All right. Step two is glass cleaner in between colors. All right, and that again, the glass cleaner keeps everything loose in the airbrush. The amount of acetone that's in there is a good airbrush cleaner in transition of changing colors. And then step three, we want to take straight acetone from Wally World, Walmart, and what we're going to do is take our airbrush and we're going to start soaking our parts in this acetone. Okay, moving on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. First of all, we have the spring here. I don't know if the camera's picking this up real well, we have the spring. It's got some little chunky things around it, okay? And that definitely would be a nightmare waiting to happen. So what you need to do, hopefully we've all have had our own little experiences with acetone to where we know that it destroys things pretty quickly. You need to get a little timer or a clock out, and I would say the rule of thumb is normally to keep anything that soaks in acetone about a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most. The part I just threw in there, I'm calling the first part the spring. This is the crown. Okay, this is the highest maintenance area of this Aztek airbrush, and I'll get into this in a minute. I'm going to throw the crown in there. All right, again, no more than a minute and a half. And then we have the fat, chubby part here. This is the capsule. Okay, this is a pretty easy area to clean of this airbrush. So we're going to let those soak for about a minute and a half. Now what's going to happen is, if you get too nutty, you can already see the paint starting to fall off there a little bit. Acetone will do what other things just simply will not do. It will break down the nooks and crannies of what the glass cleaner won't. So a lot of people, if you go to a hobby store or whatever, they will tell you to buy a standard airbrush cleaner. That standard airbrush cleaner is really only good for taxidermy paints, certain types of illustration paints, certain types of dyes, but it does not do too much for the Createx paints that we use. So you have to revert to a backyard system like this to actually be able to overhaul this airbrush. It's totally useless to learn how to use airbrushes if you do not know how to clean them. So a minute and a half has went by. Okay, I'm going to scoot this over here so the camera can see it. I'm going to move in on the straight water. Now after a minute and a half has went by, I'm going to take all three of these pieces and throw them in the water, straight H2O here. Okay, and the acetone has for the most part got this to where everything's loose and should be able to fall off here. Now what I have here is a Teflon key ring here. The camera may or may not pick this up. You can use any type of maybe pipe cleaner, whatever works, as long as the acetone doesn't melt it. These Teflon key rings are normally around, I don't know, $23 at Hobbytown, USA. You can go to PPG paint company, ppg.com, and I think you can get one of these for like $8. So now that the acetone has broken all the paint down that's inside these tips, I'm going to take this sewing needle here. This is a nice little thing to sneak in, and if you want to, with a sewing needle or an airbrush needle, you can put a little bend in it to basically gouge paint out that way too. I'm going to brush the front part of this tip off here, like so. Okay, then swish that out in water. I'm going to come in on the back end of this and just gouge any of the paint out that way and just kind of brush around it. One thing people need to know here is that a film of paint could cause a nightmare. A lot of times that's what we don't see when we're experiencing the things that get clogged up in these airbrushes, is that a film of paint can cause just as much problems as a speckle of paint. Brush that out. Okay, swish it in water, and we're going to call that part done. Alright, that's totally done. I'm going to set it off to the side there. Okay, still in water. I'm going to go ahead and pull the spring out now. The spring's even easier. You can actually just take a toothbrush or whatever and just brush this spring off. It's totally easy. As long as you see the paint come off, you're fine. Okay, so we're going to set the spring off to the side. The third piece here is the highest maintenance area of this airbrush here. Now what I'm going to do here, the very front tip, sometimes paint will get encrusted around the front part of this crown here. Okay, so what I'll do is take a needle, an old airbrush needle, sewing needle, whatever, and you want to lightly come in here, and you don't want to rupture this tip, but just push anything out of the tip that the acetone has softened up. Now this is a key area to where acetone will do things that glass cleaner won't. Okay, the glass cleaner has actually softened up anything that may be in there. This one's not super dirty, but anything that's in there, this needle is going to be able to push it out. Now you can take a Teflon key ring. This is probably the more professional way to do it. Put it in there, okay, twist it and pull it back, and you'll probably see paint on the key ring or whatever. I think I just cleaned these a couple days ago, so they're not that bad. But gouge the paint, twist it, pull it out the back, or take a needle and push it through the front lightly. You will rupture this tip if you goose this needle too hard. And you can take your fingernails and just kind of spin it around on any tip dry that may be pre-existing around the top of this thing, okay? So I would say 80% of your nightmares are going to be around the top of this middle part of the tip here. I call this the crown, I call this the capsule, and I call this the spring, okay? So after we have this cleaned out, swish it in water, and what we're going to do, we're going to take this, put it back in the middle here, kind of sets in there. We're going to take the spring, and this may or may not click. You guys don't freak out if this does not click in there. This one just did, but if it does not click, don't worry about it. It will still be operative. Now I think Testors always tells people not to take these tips out because they're set in there with the computer, but I've never met a person, and that includes everybody from an airline pilot to a real technical nerdy computer guy to an airbrush teacher to whoever, that has never had to take these tips apart. You have to take them apart, if not you're stranded. Okay, moving on to the color cap here. And again, I want to recap here. We push down for air, back for paint. That's down for air, back for paint. The trigger wiggles to the side, okay? And the paint, of course, goes that way. We never want to suffocate an airbrush or back flush it, again, because dry paint particles will resonate around the trigger. But one thing I want to talk about is right in here by the color cap. You want to keep this thing snug, okay? Because a lot of people, they get lazy and they just set it in here like that, okay? And you'll have a vacuum leak that you may or may not see bubbling. So just make sure that that's all snugged up. Don't break it, and you'll be good to go, okay? Let's go ahead and set this thing in the acetone. I'm going to move the water aside. I'm going to set this thing in acetone for about 1.5 minutes here. And again, the acetone will break down anything that's in the little arm of the color cap here. I mean, as long as there's something going through it like that, it's clean. But you can just kind of get in there and eyeball it. I can kind of preface here a little bit. You can take the Teflon key ring and just gouge the paint out, kind of goose it back and forth. And the acetone is going to get anything that's in there too. Okay, you can come in here with a grainy pad and scrub that out. Okay, I'm going to move the acetone to the side, bring the water in here, and basically just swish it out. I'm kind of flying through this, but as long as it's doing that, then it's clean. And again, if you want your equipment to look good, take a greeny pad, you know, a kitchen greeny, and scrub the sides of this and so on. But this is the main thing. Let the acetone break all this down. Come in here and gouge the paint out. And if you see water flowing through it or whatever, then it's clean. And again, it's not a sacrilege until you get one of these Teflon key rings. You can take an old airbrush needle or a sewing needle. You can put a little hook in it at the top of the needle there, and you can actually snag paint out that way too, okay? It's really just a preference. Okay, last part here, I'm going to move the water out of the way, bring the acetone back in, and the camera may or may not pick this up. It normally does not, but inside the airbrush, the front part of the airbrush here, there's a silver piston. Normally you do not see it on camera. But what you need to do is take your airbrush, and this is acetone now, for about 1.5 minutes, okay? And you do not want to submerge the airbrush beyond this silver base here, okay, or the peg. After about 1.5 minutes, what you want to do is let the acetone resonate or kind of soak around that little silver dot you see in there, okay? Again, you may or may not see it, but that's still where paint's going to get clogged. And sometimes, again, if your tips are totally clean, your color cap is totally clean, okay? You got your roller WD-40. Everything's groovy. Your air pressure is groovy. Your paint mixture is groovy. This could be where the nightmare is, around that silver piston in there. I think I'm catching it right there. If not, you'll have to look at it on your own time there. So about 1.5 minutes, soak your airbrush in this acetone. And sometimes, after about 1.5 minutes, you can tap the airbrush and a ring of paint will fall out, okay? And you'll know that you're getting a lot out of there. This is a huge part of this. I've really almost had a nervous breakdown trying to find out where the clog was and where the restriction was. We've talked about vacuum leaks in the color cap. We've talked about paint around the different parts of the tip, but this is a big one here too. So what you're going to do, after about a minute and a half, you want to come in with a needle, an old airbrush needle or whatever, and you want to basically scoop around that piston. Now here's the trick. If the paint or the needle is dancing around that silver piston really nicely, it's probably clean, okay? This one's pretty clean. Again, I just cleaned most of these out a couple days ago, but let the piston dance around, or let the needle dance around the piston. And again, tap it, swish it in water. Let's bring the water into this now. Just kind of swish that around in water. And the water keeps any type of components to this thing from drying up. If you go from acetone right and clean it out and set it on the table like this, it's just going to be a nightmare because acetone still leaves a dry film and it dries and cracks things. Also with metal airbrushes, you always want to take your black gaskets off before you soak the airbrush in acetone, because acetone will definitely melt those gaskets. So switch this around in water and then take the needle, dance around the piston. If it's dancing around there or moving around there, it's probably clean, okay? So after that, I'm going to take the tip, put it on here real quick. Snugsville is what you want. If you over restrict these tips, they may restrict paint flow. So just kind of snug that up. There's a little red wrench that comes with this kit. That's a good idea too. Also, on the color cap, I'm going to make sure that's totally flush and there's no gap in between that. And again, I'm going to have to clean that out a little bit later. I'm just kind of paraphrasing this whole cleaning thing here. Snug the color cap up, okay? And then also make sure that this peg on the opposite side where I'm touching with my thumb, make sure that's snug too. Now if you're left or right handed, you can take the color cap and put it on this side and the peg on this side. We can also airbrush down, across, and up if we want to do clouds on a ceiling or whatever. Again, I'm doing this for my students, so a lot of them have had problems cleaning, or they've been so busy in their schedules where they have had a hard time remembering the steps to cleaning this thing and where the nightmares are. So I hope this helps you guys. Please call me or email me if you have any other questions, and have a good day. Thank you.